This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
Okay, you got it. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
Remember what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome on all to Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, the home of free speech, where we find the facts, kill the spin, and tell it like it is as best we can. Coming up today, we're going to talk about whether Ukraine is a fraudster's paradise and what on earth is the coalition of the willing. Can it even survive without United States involvement? Of course, they're willing to sell the weapons, but they don't want to pay for them. Smart move, Donald Trump. Not so smart by Keir Starmer. That's my opinion. You can have yours as well. Now, the question I've got to ask you, though, is what on earth is going on in Ukraine? It's a subject we sadly have to come back to time and time again, because the mainstream media doesn't seem very keen on talking about the enormous levels of fraud which are being persistently exposed in the Ukrainian capital and beyond. Now, the most embarrassing recent development was another $100 million fraud, as far as I understand it, that involved the energy sector. And Zelensky's old business partner. Well, okay, it's getting close to Zelensky. Some people say he's a fraudster too, but I haven't got the evidence for that. It'll all come out in the wash eventually when Zelensky finally has to surrender territory and gets booted out of his job. That's another prediction. Let's see if I'm right. If you're watching this in the archive, you can probably find out. But the big problem I've got here is this. Ukraine is not somewhere where you can win against Russia. They've got an amateur army with people my age in it, or even older, if that's possible. They've got an incompetent commander, namely Zelensky, who actually is a professional clown, not a good qualification for running a military. And worst of all, they've got the might of the Russian army against them, one of the most formidable and experienced military operations in the world. At the same time, Zelensky has to cope with other problems. I call them Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. Oh, and let's throw in that other foolish failed politician, Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels. Those are not the kind of people you want on your side if you're going to win, in my view. But what is to be done? To what extent is Ukraine doing rather better than I'm suggesting? And is there any way out of it for Ukraine without losing face? Joining me now, as always on a Wednesday, it is the most impressive and most intelligent man I have on a Wednesday, and that's Nick Buckley MBE. You're looking at those weird
someone behind me then.
He's behind you. What are those things behind you? I didn't mean to ask. You've got evident Christian paraphernalia there, and then you've got those rather scary things just next to your face.
I've done a lot of backpacking around the world over many years, and I tend to buy something, not to every country, but almost every country I go to. So I've got masks from South Africa, from Cambodia, the crucifixes from Rome, some of the pictures are from Malaysia, the bean pod there is from Thailand. So I just buy odd stuff when I'm traveling.
You must have almost as big an environmental footprint as Ed Miliband.
Oh, bigger.
Maybe not as big as Keir Starmer, who flew all the way to Egypt just to be humiliated by Donald Trump. But that's another story. The humiliation we're talking about today is the relentless stories of fraud coming out of Ukraine. Is the latest one. Zelensky sanctions former business partner as $100 million fraud scandal rocks Ukraine. This is the latest in a whole bunch of stories. I have to say that I've always regarded Ukraine as desperately corrupt country. And then we get stories like this, 14th November, very recent. And it's his former business partner. A lot of people think that Zelensky's a fraudster, but as I said in my introduction, I haven't seen evidence of that. But this seems pretty much a smoking gun. Former business partner. Why are we giving so much money to a country that has people who are stealing $1/10 billion, and apparently is a friend of Zelensky's.
First of all, this is normal and this is perfectly acceptable in something like 90% of the world. It's only Western Europe and North America who actually looks upon fraud as a bad thing, because we see the damage it can do to economies, to business deals, to trust, and to society. Everywhere else in the world, this is perfectly acceptable. This is how things are done. This is how business is done. This is how rich families survive. This is how poor people become rich people. This is perfectly acceptable. Why do we put up with it? Why do we, one of our partners, Ukraine, for some reason, why do we put up with this? Because it's in our government's interest. Now, what that interest is a different discussion for a different day, because I can't work it out in my head. The British government, the French government, to be funding the Ukraine war, to wanting Ukraine not to come to peace deals, not to annex a little part of their country. I mean, these things aren't great for Ukraine. I get that. But what the hell does that have to do with us and our country? Our Prime Minister and our government should be working out the best deal for us that's acceptable for you, that's acceptable to Ukraine and Russia. They don't have interests at heart. They're looking at Ukraine and thinking, what's the best deal for them, regardless of how it affects us, regardless how much money we have to give that goes into the pockets of fraudsters.
Meanwhile, though, you've got Donald Trump, who is playing a bit of a blinder, to be honest with you, because he's managed to get to a situation where he said to Starmer and everybody else, "We'll sell you the weapons, but we won't give you the weapons." So Trump has actually now managed to quite overtly monetize the Ukraine war without cost to him and his people. Now that's a remarkable. It's a remarkable achievement, because he's essentially been able to say to Europe, gullible Europe, "Oh, you pay for the war, but we'll make a profit out of it." What's not to like?
For the Americans, it's a good deal, and for the Americans, they're thinking it's about bloody time. How many times have we saved Europe? How many times have we funded Europe? How many decades did we station our soldiers in Europe and paid for all of it? And the European countries weren't even funding NATO. We were funding it all. They weren't even paying the 2% they had to pay by agreement. They still weren't even paying that. So the Americans have had enough of Europe and had enough of NATO, and are saying, if you want our weapons, we'll sell them you. We don't mind selling them you. And it's about time you bloody bought some off us.
Does that basically mean that Biden was wrong and Trump was right?
Everything Biden did was wrong. Everything. I don't even know what you're going to name next, but if Biden did it, then it was wrong.
Well, I have to say, my favorite line, we've even got a TV series here on Unprecedented called "Poor Kids and White Kids," when he said, "Poor kids can do just as well as white kids." Wonderful. It tells you all you need to know about his mindset. But
it's not as bad. It's not as bad as "free the sausages."
Oh, it's incredible. It really is. That's why we include it in the introduction to this show. How can you make a mistake like that? Sausages and hostages doesn't even really sound the same. The guy said, I don't know how to put it really. It's, no, I nearly said something I can't on a family show. But there he is, Keir Starmer. He's been told, by the way, this piece of video is just plain embarrassing, because you got them all laughing. There's Mark Rutte, very weird guy, Zelensky, all these people. They seem to literally be just a pack of jokers. And the problem I've got with all of this is, look at them. Without the sound up, they actually just look like idiots. With the sound up, they sound like it too. But the coalition of the willing, we've got this ridiculous argument going on that Europe can fight on. Well, Ukraine was losing even with American support. How could they going to win without it? And basically, this coalition of the willing, it's a joke. What does coalition of the willing even mean?
It's one of those PR catchphrases that someone came up with in a room somewhere and thought, oh, This will muddy the water so much. Let's start using it. Coalition of the willing. The willing. The willing to do what? Willing to bankrupt your country. Willing to pull your country into a foreign war. Willing to do what? We don't know what the willing is. What they mean is it's the coalition of the willing to fight evil. That's what we're doing. We're fighting evil. And evil is always external. And if you keep me as your leader, and all these leaders are saying that if you keep me as your leader, I can guarantee this country will fight evil. Because if we don't fight this Russian evil bear, they're going to come and invade us. Because look what they're doing to a tiny, tiny part of Ukraine. And they could do that to the whole. Remember Nazi Germany? Do you remember it? We're fighting a new. And it's all about these failing leaders, these weak, pathetic leaders who don't care about the nation state, but using the nation state so their populace will not look internal and go, my country's failing. My country's poorer today than it was a decade ago. And we're being invaded by third world immigrants. Crime's out of control. Spending's out of control. Taxing us is out of control. But you want us to look at a bad man somewhere else so we don't look at you because you're the bad man as well.
It's very timely that you talk about in Britain being invaded. I saw the most ridiculous headline, apparently put there with a straight face. UK lacks plan to defend itself from invasion, warns MP. I mean, come on. MPs are telling us that we couldn't repel an invasion. Who's going to invade? Scotland? Yeah. France? The Isle of Man? It's a ridiculous claim. We're not going to be invaded by anybody. Who would want to?
I mean, it's one of those stupid things that the MP has no idea what they're talking about, unless he's been told to say it, because we need to start creating a bad man somewhere else so we can increase spending, increase taxation, control the people, introduce more terror laws, introduce more censorship, because look, we could be invaded. Now, you're right. Who's going to invade the UK? Absolutely no one. The Americans couldn't even invade the UK if they wanted to. Those days have gone, especially for Western Europe at this moment in time. Doesn't mean a few decades from now things will change. It may change, but at the moment we're not going to be invaded. Now, if you slightly change this headline and say the UK is not prepared for a large war, well, that's probably perfectly true. We're not prepared for a large war somewhere else. We haven't got the resources, the manpower, the trained soldiers. We haven't got the money, the equipment. You know, the army's gone woke. I mean, how many drag queens do you want going over the top with a machine gun and breaking their nails and complaining? So we're not in a state to fight a big war, but that's a different argument altogether. We're not. There's no one threatening to invade us in the short to medium term.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the whole situation is that when you see headlines like this, you realize that there has to be an enormous patronizing assumption by MPs, or maybe they really are that stupid these days that they think we're going to be invaded, but also by the media to put forward a headline which is so ridiculous. We've got another one. Can we put the yeah, you know the one I mean. Yeah. Do you know why are we looking at that, do you think? That's Wembley Stadium. Why is that relevant?
No idea.
Because the entire full-time army could fit into Wembley Stadium, and there'd still be 15,000 spare seats.
Yeah.
You can't defend a country with a regular army of 74,000 people. And it's not just that, they can't even defend the channel.
Yeah.
And how are we going to defend the country when we can't even stop unarmed men, mainly men, coming across on little rubber boats like that one? They can't even stop that. So yes, we're not prepared for an invasion because we're being invaded and we're not prepared for it.
Yep, and we haven't got any politicians with a backbone to want to do the things that need to be done. So let's say Russia was marching through Eastern Europe now, and they've just entered Western Europe. our government at this moment in time, and plus all the Tories, for the last 14 years, just as bad as this Labour government, they would be saying, oh, what can we do? And we need to talk to Russia. We need to show them compassion, and we need to make sure if we're going to fight the Russians, and we may have to, but if we're going to fight the Russians, we need to make sure half of their armed forces are women, and 20% are black, and 5% of LGBT, because we're not fighting them because it's not going to be a fair war, because our diversity is so powerful that it's going to be unfair if we start fighting young, fit, white, scary men. That's an unfair advantage to us. So they need to employ more queer soldiers. And that's what our leaders would be saying. They'd saying it's not a fair fight, because our leaders are not leaders. Our leaders have a different agenda. And one day we probably need to work out what those agendas are they're fighting, because it's not what we think they're doing. It's not about the country. It's not about the nation. It's not about the British people. They're fighting for world government. I think that's really what they're fighting for.
We'll come back to this in a minute. You're watching me, Lembit Öpik, with Nick Buckley MBE, as we try to figure out whether Ukraine is a fraudster's paradise, and why are we defending them? Why are we helping them when they can't even keep a tight ship themselves? Elsewhere, you'll find the dulcet tones of Claire Dyer on Dire Consequences. She is a one-person freedom fighter. She takes local issues which are of national interest. Watch this. Consequences there, usually on Tuesday mornings and Thursday afternoons, UK time. And don't forget, we've also got Good Morning USA coming up in the next couple of weeks with Sarah Evie Clark, our woman in Dallas. So that's something to look forward to. But for now, I'm still with Nick Buckley, MBE. Just before the break there, we were talking about this ludicrous idea that somebody might want to invade Britain. Well, we've got the invasion. It's happening all the time. It's a classic example of it there. And there's another one. Yeah, hang on, put that one back up. Yeah, there we are. There are people who are paying to come across, and there are people who aren't. Well, they are. They're actually paying more. Ironically, it's cheaper to travel on a big boat than a small one. but we're getting ridiculous numbers, and the figures that are being quoted, they're just the ones that we know about. If you ask anybody who lives on the south coast, they'll tell you that they see people arriving, running up the beach and joining the ranks of the great unwashed in Britain, claiming asylum for whatever reason, then changing their pleas as the case goes on. Why can't we even defend the Channel, but we think we can defend Ukraine?
The Channel is one of the greatest things in this country. It saved us so many times. It saved us from the Spanish Armada. It saved us from Napoleon. It saved us from Hitler. They didn't get in little boats and sail across because we stopped them, because it's a moat around the country, and it's a fantastic defense mechanism for the UK. Why can't we stop these little boats with third world migrants on it? It's because we don't have the will to do it. If I was Prime Minister, I could stop it in 48 hours. That's all it takes. We've got drone technology now, so we know we know they're launching. We know they're in the Channel. When they're in the Channel, they actually phone us. They actually phone the lifeguard when they're in the Channel to say, "I'm in the Channel. Can you come pick me up, please?" And then the lifeguard people or the border force come and pick them up. If they're in trouble, the French come out and steady the boat and the raft, and they phone up the British to say, "Yeah, we've got a boat here. Can you come pick them up?" It's a taxi service. We could stop him in 48 hours, but no politician wants the risk of something happening in the Channel and someone dying or a boat overturning and whatever. They don't want that picture in the press, so therefore will allow hundreds of thousands, well, it's not 100,000, it's 50, 60, 70,000. They'll allow them to come in every year because they don't want the bad headline of something going wrong. But the fact we don't deal with it means people are dying in the channel every year. And we've encouraged them to use this route, and we've encouraged them to die. And what we should be saying to these third world migrants across the world is, you're not welcome. We don't care if you're being persecuted. We don't care what your story is. If you're being persecuted, flee your country and go to a neighboring country and seek asylum there, because you're not wanted in the UK. The only people we'll take in asylum claims in the UK should be the French and should be the Irish. So if you have civil wars or you get dictators, we may take some French people and we may take some Irish people because you're next to us. But apart from that, no one claims asylum in the UK. But no, to do that, you'd have to leave international organisations, and our ruling class don't want to leave international organisations.
Yeah, the Irish are unlikely to have a revolution, and the French had one. And now they're paying the price because they got Emmanuel Macron and they had Sarkozy as well. Now, what's interesting about what we're discussing is this we've been quite a discursive conversation, but back to the problem of fraudsters' paradise, it seems to me, which is Ukraine. Viktor Orban is never shy at coming forward and criticizing the others, basically. I actually like Orban. I think Orban tends to say it like it is. He's got a really low opinion of Zelensky, as do I. I reckon he probably doesn't think much of Keir Starmer either. And there's that loathsome person, in my view, Ursula von der Leyen, who's basically trying to cut Hungary out of NATO votes, people like her, because she doesn't like the fact that he doesn't support the NATO, essentially the NATO-based war. But there's a moment of hubris. I don't think Orban really means anything positive there at all. Now, I like Orban because, well, here it is. It's astonishing that you asked for more money instead of suspending payments. Orban thinks that Zelensky is not a credible leader. And worse than that, Orban is repeatedly saying he doesn't want Zelensky and Ukraine in NATO. And that's one of the three key requests or demands of Russia. I think it's a fairly reasonable demand myself. I don't understand why it's so difficult for people to understand the three demands. One, no Ukraine in NATO. A demilitarized, number two, demilitarized Ukraine, and three, the denazification of Ukraine. Now, on that third one, this shouldn't be difficult. If Ukraine isn't Nazified, then you should be able to agree with it and do nothing. But apparently, this is all too much for Ukraine's allies. So that third one is a moot point. On the other two, I don't want to see a militarized Ukraine. I don't see why they need to be. Ironically, if they stop being militarized, the war will stop. And already the promise was made 35 years ago that NATO would not move an inch to the east, and they completely lied about that. What's the problem with those three demands?
I don't see any problems with them. I think Viktor Orban is disliked across Europe for this one reason, and it's because he puts the Hungarian people first. Shock, horror. He puts his own people first and the interests of his country first. Now, there's a discussion to have about NATO. Is NATO still needed? Is NATO out of date because the Cold War's ended and now NATO is trying to find purpose in a new world, therefore looking for trouble, looking for enemies? Because most of the people who work for NATO are on bloody good money and have great pensions, so they don't want to see all this end suddenly. It's like charity sector. Well, once we end, child poverty, they then rewrite what child poverty is so they can carry on fighting child poverty. And that's what NATO has tended to do as well, just change what they're about. The demilitarization of Ukraine, of course, we should be looking at that and want that. And we should be doing that for the benefit of the Ukrainian people. The land Russia occupies now is, I mean, Russia never should have invaded Ukraine in the first place. So I'm not a supporter of Putin. But once it happened, and we've had years now of the meat grinder of soldiers being killed, and the borders have hardly changed. No one is winning this. It's a bit like Korea. We've got to a stalemate. All we're doing now is killing each other. So that needs to stop, and we need to look for peace. Peace that Ukraine will lose some land, of course they will, and maybe the Russians will have to give up some territory as well. But we need peace because so many people are dying. And then when you look at you, go on, sorry.
I was going to say just before we go further, I actually have a different view. I think Russia is winning. It's winning it slowly, but it's winning. Petrovsk, I think, is a place where they've been fighting. It's been very bloody, but it looks like Russia's now finally getting control of it, and that's strategically important. I actually think that the longer this continues, the more land Russia will get, and even more seriously, the more Ukrainians primarily will die. Warren Thornton, who we regularly have on pretty much every day on Unprecedented, he thinks that for every one Russian that dies, 18 Ukrainians are dying, which kind of makes sense because the Russians are a full-time army, or at least they're well-trained. Ukraine's now got pensioners on the front line pretty much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think let's take that as a given. Let's say Russia is slowly winning this, slightly gaining more territory and winning, and the Ukrainians are on the back foot. Let's say that's a given. I still think Russia at this moment in time will sue for peace and would jump at a chance of suing for peace as long as it looks like they've gained something out of this. Because if they don't gain, that's why this war's not stopping. If it looks like Putin's failed, Putin's dead. Putin is dead. They will kill him and somebody will topple him and he will die. If Ukraine lose, their leader will just move to France and will just move somewhere else. He won't be killed unless the Russians get him. But I think the Russians are also scared of what comes after Trump. If Trump loses the next election or Vance loses the next election and they get another version of Kamala Harris or Biden or whatever, Russians are scared stiff that the Americans may enter the war. The Russians can't beat the Americans. The Russians may be a good fighting force globally, but they haven't got the technology, the money, the weapons the Americans have. So I think if we presented a peace plan to Russia that made both sides give a little, win a little bit, and both come out looking like winners, I think the Russians would snap their hand off.
Well, it's interesting because Russia said that they don't want, there we are, updates. Russia warns NATO against joining Ukraine after deadly strikes. A recent point. Russia keeps telling NATO, don't get involved in this. Now, NATO is de facto involved because the same countries that are sending the money are NATO members. Yeah. But I have to say that this headline tends to support what you've just said. But the biggest concern I've got is that however much money the West puts in, Ukraine's going to lose land. They have to, because as you say, this is, you think, literally a matter of life and death for Putin. I certainly think it's metaphorically the case. Don't know. I think he can afford pretty good security, so he'll probably be all right. But it's a matter of national pride now. And Putin is simply forcing the West to keep its promise. The promise made by James Baker, as I've said many times before, in 1990, in writing, not 1 inch to the east. That's what he said. If the Soviet Union is dismantled, NATO will not move 1 inch to the east. Now, you hear all these apologists for the West saying, oh, well, we didn't really mean it. It didn't really mean that. It was quite unequivocal. And that promise was made, and the promise has been broken. So for me, when Russia says, don't get involved, NATO, I think they're right. If NATO got more actively involved, the only way that a different outcome would occur is if this escalates into the Third World War. And that's not a good outcome.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we had a great opportunity in the 90s to bring Russia into the fold of the alliance of Europe. We could have, just like we did with Nazi Germany, just like we did with the Imperial Japanese, we destroyed those countries, and then we funded their rebuilding of them, and brought them on as partners. We should have done that with Russia. We should have said the Cold War's over. Let's be friends. You're going to, have your country. We're not going to run your country, but we should have brought them into the fold. We should have treated them like an equal partner, because that's all they ever wanted was a little bit of respect. Because they're an old, proud country. They're not Western Europe, but they're an old, proud country. If we'd have treated them better, and we should have been looking forward, going, there's other enemies in the world now. We're looking at Islam. We're looking at China. We need to make sure we're consolidating the whole of Europe. But we treated them poorly. Because our politicians still wanted the wolf at our door. So all through the 90s, the 2000s, we were still looking at Russia as the bad guys, because we always need a bad guy.
Now, finishing where we started, fraud seems to be absolutely endemic to Ukraine. I think that $100 million doesn't even touch the sides. I'm pretty sure that Ukraine is funding essentially sponsoring the illegal arms trade all over the world. Money, the weapons go in there and they get sold. And it's hard to prove these things, but it feels to me that's where we are. It feels to me that Ukraine is just a corrupt money pit. I don't actually understand how Volodymyr Zelensky, on his meager salary and whatever he managed to save as an average comedian, is so wealthy. Where did the money come from? Where did he get his tens of millions of dollars?
We know where the money come from. How did Tony Blair become a multi-millionaire? What about our politicians? What about that Tory lord? I've forgot her name now. She was in some sort of lingerie empire. And then she's ripped off the PPE loan.
Yeah, it was Moan. I think you're thinking of Moan.
Yeah, so like 100 million. So it's easy to become a multi-millionaire when you're a top politician, because people want to buy favors from you. They want to buy influence. They want to sell you stuff. And here's a brown envelope. And that's why people, not everybody, but that's why many people go into politics, because it's an easier way to make money.
I wish I'd known that when I was an MP. I didn't realize. I just literally didn't realize that it was just a money bag.
And that's why you never became prime minister, because you didn't know you could have bought your way to the top with brown envelopes.
You said top politicians. Maybe I just wasn't one. But we got Zelensky here. This phrase again: Zelensky sanctions former business partner as $100 million fraud scandal rocks Ukraine. Either Zelensky is a terrible judge of character, or he's a terrible character. I can't see any other options here. But we're going to carry on sending money as long as Keir Starmer's in charge, aren't we?
Yeah, and just like we did when the Tories were in charge under Boris Johnson, this isn't just a Labour problem. Labour have just carried on the insanity of the Tory government in many fields and topics, but this is one of them. I mean, Boris Johnson went over there saying, we're by your side and we're going to fund you forever. And it's like, but that's just Boris Johnson, who's been the worst prime minister in my lifetime. Boris Johnson was worse than Keir Starmer.
I'm not sure I agree. I think Keir Starmer's worse because he's done 100-year pact. 100-year pacts with Ukraine. Yeah. So regardless of who runs it, regardless if it's Nazifies or declares war on Poland, apparently we're in this 100-year pact with Ukraine. It's ridiculous. I spoke to a lovely Polish woman a couple of days ago, and I didn't really go into the Ukraine thing, but I had the impression that she was pretty unimpressed with Ukraine, and like just an annoyance at the door. How long do you think this war will continue?
As long as they have the backing from the main European countries. So as long as France, UK, and we've not discussed Germany. Well, what's Germany's stance on this?
Well, they're vaguely in favour of it. I think
right.
Benz is pro, but the coalition of willing hasn't really done anything. They throw money at it, but none of them are going to commit any troops to it.
No,
because you can't have body bags coming back to European Union countries.
Yeah, they'll keep funding it as long as they're not bankrupt, because to admit. I mean, a new governments may stop it, as in let's say Reform are elected next year. Reform may change policy on this because they're not damaged by it either way. But the Tories and Labour can't change policy on this now because they've signed up to it. Same with France. It would take a new government. It would take a government to say to have to admit to the people, this policy is completely wrong. This policy is leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians in a war that can never be won unless Western Europe enter the war. And we're never going to enter the war and put our troops at risk because we would never survive. So the only solution for this is a peace deal. And until the money stops from Western Europe, a peace deal is not on the table.
And for now, of course, it's very much in the interest of the fraudsters to continue with the chaos. There's a great phrase. It's called the Mavericks motto. And it's let chaos reign, then reign in chaos. And that's what seems to be happening there.
Yeah, and war is very good for business.
Yeah, maybe we should set something up. Thank you very much indeed. You'd lose your MBE if you did that, probably. Thank you. That is all we got time for today. That's Nick Buckley MBE. I wonder what you think as well. A few comments here. Trump is the something, says Yo Chill. Morning, my lovelies. Morning, Elizabeth Robb. Russia never wanted war, but it was forced on them. I tend to agree with you, Mike Pepper. Ted Warden says it wasn't in writing. Stop liking. Don't know what that means. But Thin Dad says Starmer is the worst ever. I tend to agree with you. Thank you for those comments. You'll find lots of other shows coming on as well, including the wonderful Warren Thornton. He gives me a lot of the objective information about Ukraine. He's very well connected militarily. You'll also find other great shows, and do check out our archive. And please subscribe by going to Unprecedented TV on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll find hundreds and hundreds of programs there, and you can test to see how accurate we are as well. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV. Have a good day.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.